Another two great games of Legacy. First one against a Grixis Delver variant, but the next one against a combo deck called Mississippi River that I've never experienced before. And it just goes to show that in that matchup, some of the old stalwart abilities of Modern Mill still stick true in terms of their power level in this format as well. Enjoy. And for some more Legacy. With some greedy hands, I need to get better with just playing either more lands or just keeping less. Anyway, Archive Trap my opponent. Dragon's Way Channeler is turned on. I'm going to go to Surgical to Force of Will. I see my opponent has Orcish Bowmasters and some stuff going on, but this means that my spells are generally speaking going to resolve. And obviously I still have to contend with Daze, but my Crab's going to go out for free. Hopefully they didn't top deck the Daze, which they didn't. And I have my Force of Will for the Orcish Bowmasters. That's my big plan. At this point, I see two Murktide Regents in their graveyard, and with the Force of Will's gone, the Tasha's Hideous Laughter is actually pretty dang powerful. So that's one big thing to note, and I think that's really what's going to guide me through this game. Can I resolve this Tasha's? My opponent decides not to play Bowmasters. I think they know as well. We're playing a blue deck. Ultimately speaking, Daze, Force of Will, something to contend with on our end. My opponent is going to keep swinging at us. It is a very relevant clock. I'm going to Brainstorm. They're going to Spell Pierce it, and I really need this Brainstorm to resolve, so I have to Force of Will. I actually thought that with Bowmasters, that's what I was trying to dig for, just like force that action on their turn, but they managed to find the Spell Pierce, and I unfortunately don't find a land just yet, and they managed to, well, put that away from our Mystic Sanctuary with a Wasteland. Now, I have the Flooded Strand on top. I didn't want to put it into our hand just in case we needed a Force of Will something. I desperately want to keep this Tasha's, but at this point, I'm top decking. I still don't see the third Murktide in the graveyard, so it may not have been the most profitable Tasha's even if we got it off, but again, I still have the Force of Will if anything crazy results. For now, it's fine. They play DRC. I'm really surprised they're not playing this Bowmasters, but I guess they want their clock. I will keep fetching them out. I see the final Murktide, and at this point, it's lethal. I know mathematically speaking. I throw it out there. Hopefully don't have the Daze, and we got there. Let's go to game two. Bada bing, bada boom. We are on the draw. Dragon's Way Channeler comes out. I go to force it. I just don't want to clock with this hand out. I don't have anything aggressive to throw out there. I play a Flooded Strand. I play out my Crab, and I was honestly just hoping to pick out the Daze at this point. I want the early interaction gone. The Lightning Bolted, and this is kind of the frustrating thing with the Grixis variants of this. They have the Fatal Pushes and the Lightning Bolts. This could be the soft Grixis where they're not playing Fatal Push, but for now, we don't know that. Now, I have the Brainstorm in response to their fetch, and I decided to put the Fractured Sanity and the Brainfreeze away as well. I don't need the additional copy, and so Dragon's Way Channeler comes out. They get their Trop Island as well. They play Counterbalance. I Archive Trap in response, and I think this is where things start going downhill. The Counterbalance actually ends up being really good, especially with the Dragon's Way Channeler out. They can manipulate the top card of their library pretty dang well. They have a Ponder already set up, and honestly, that's pretty much the game. They have 42 cards left in deck. How am I going to manage any of this? And obviously, you can mathematically see here that I didn't address it at the beginning of the round, but they brought in more than 60 cards. So, with the Ponder fresh out in a Wasteland, really, my lands aren't even going to survive if I get out a Mystic Sanctuary. So, I know that generally they have a counterspell in hand. Am I really going to throw out this Fractured Sanity? No, I'm going to look to cycle it at this point, mill them for some uncounterable mill, and really from there try and draw into something better. I took 3, managed to take out Wasteland and a Lightning Bolt, which I guess is a win. Found a Tasha's. If I can get this Surgical off on like a Force of Will or a Murktide Regent, should be pretty good. So I'm going to do it on their turn. They're going to manipulate the top card of their library with this, and they actually bait me pretty well. I should have let this happen because I thought the Surgical was going to get countered. It ultimately doesn't get countered. This was actually a really good bait on their side. You'll notice I actually mill over a Force of Negation, which was perfectly fine. I actually should have just let them have that. They would have just shuffled their stuff away, not drawn that Force at all. Or maybe they could have, but again, that was ultimately the problem there. They have another Force in hand, and I just have to hope that, well, I find something, which I don't, and ultimately realizing they have the 2 blue and the colorless untapped for that Force Negation. I can't resolve anything. I'm at 2. Let's go to game 3. Going into game 3, honestly, I just have to get better at playing blue mirrors. This is a pretty desperate game. It's just so much thinking involved with these mirrors, and this is just me learning the format, honestly. honestly. So I'll chalk it up to that. I'll take all the noob comments down below, and please let me know this game specifically, how could I have better played it? My opponent starts off in Dragon's Rage Chandler. Should I have mulligan this hand? I'm keeping the Brazen Borrower for any tricky stuff like the counterbalance that comes in, and I play on my Hedron Crab, play around the Daze because I need my value to stick as much as possible here, and this is ultimately where I misplay. It just gets to a really greedy set of things. I ultimately know that they could play the Bowmasters here, so I force it out and then try and Brainstorm here, and they're gonna really daze my Brainstorm, which you're gonna see coming up here, and that's where we fail. This is the failure right here. I should have seen around this. I ultimately didn't think about the Daze, and this is my modern brain thinking. I didn't go to that step 3 where they would have had the counterspell, and I essentially just call it here. I really don't know how to outvalue, like, just value things in this game. The Orcish Bowmasters triggers, I draw into a Daze. There's just not much happening here. I'm going to concede based on a 5-card hand in this insane board. Let's just go to the next game where much more fun things happen. Going into game 1 of this kind of second round here, my opponent is about to show me one of the coolest decks I've ever seen. It's called Mississippi River, as I've said in the intro. So I ponder trying to find another land. I shuffle ultimately, as you can see. My opponent plays a land that I am just not familiar with when it comes to Legacy. I play a Hedron Crab and pass. The Force Will is actually just a blessing because I figured they're ramping out these lands like tap for 2, so why not? Like, why not have the Force Will counter into something? I Brainstorm on main phase and find 2 lands, which is great. Put some other stuff away, keep the Force of Will. Ultimately, I probably am not going to get to Tasha's anything at this point. I see my first cards being milled. I see the show and tell, and I'm thinking, okay, this Brainstorm in my hand has to find Surgical because the Emrakul is there. I see some other cards that are like cascading into other things, and I ultimately don't know what's going on right now. I find out post-board when I'm looking through kind of cards for their deck. But at this point, I find the Surgical, so this is good. I'm just going to aggressively mill, get going, try and find the Emrakul so that the shuffle effect is gone, and then I can try and manage, I don't know, whatever's going on their side with the mana and everything. I have the Force of Will for the first spell they cast. That's the best I can do. At this point, I have the Crab. I don't want to play anything. I ultimately could have played the Crab here. I actually don't know why I didn't, but I think it was more so just I could have just used it at Force of Will fodder. The Archive Traps are great, and now I'm going to play my Crab because, look, the Force of Will is going to go to the Tashas. The other 3 Archive Traps are going to be great once the Emrakul is gone. There is an opportunity for them to search their library. If there isn't, and I'm playing a slow game, then that's going to be great. Now, I counter out the show and tell. I can't let that resolve, and I'm going to mill them a bit here, and 2 triggers in, I find the Emrakul. So there it is. I'm going to Surgical it. That's great, and they're going to spend 3 mana with the Trumpeting Carnivosaur to kill my Crab. So that's fine. I have no problem with that. I'm actually going to Flooded Strand for a Mystic Sanctuary, and then target the Ponder. I need to draw some cards. I need to find ways to get lands and start hard casting traps, because at this point, it's a race. Right? They're going to be able to do some crazy, insane stuff, and that's exactly what they're going to do here. They're going to Creative Technique. If they allow the trigger to go off, I copy a Creative Technique. I play a Ruin Crab, and you're going to see my opponent's whole plan go off. It's going to start from here. So they play the Omniscience, which is problem number 1. The Ethereum Horn Sorceress is going to come out as well. They play another Creative Technique. They're just cascading into so many things. And really, I just want to show the point of this deck. Now, they play the Trumpeting Carnosaur, and really what I need y'all to see is the Maelstrom Wanderer. Creatures you control have haste. And there you go. That's essentially what it is. You're cascading into a massive board, cascade, and you're just winning off the Maelstrom Wanderer through like Omniscience and everything. It's a pretty sweet deck. Again, it's called Mississippi River just because of everything going on. You're just flowing down the stream. And I actually just let this game go because I just want to see more and more of the combo. Like, what is it trying to do? What are the cards involved and where it's going? I get the basic premise of like Omnitel, but this is a pretty cool variant of it. At this point, I've seen enough. Let's go to game 2. I think we can win this. Now, if you weren't aware, when it comes to playing modern, fragile combo decks are actually a relatively easy thing for us to beat. And we actually end up getting pretty lucky. We have a 7-card hand with Leyline of the Void, and thanks to recent changes to Commander being introduced everywhere, we have a lot of each opponent's spells. So the Hedron Crab is kind of useless, but the double Ponder is great. I am going to end up shuffling both, spoiler warning there, but I am able to find multiple other spells, and this Ruin Crab initially is going to be the great start there. The Maddening Cacophony is going to be a great follow-up as well, but I see that they're ramping. I draw another Leyline of the Void, which is ultimately a null draw, but because the Emrakul's have no kind of bearing to me, I just have to hope they don't go off on like turn 4 or something like that, maybe mulligan into or go into something quicker. They decide to kill the crab, which is actually big win. That sets them back on mana, especially colored mana. So I will take that wherever it is. Now, I throw out the Maddening Cacophony. I ultimately think about, should I keep that for the half effect? Can I get to that amount of mana and do it? Ultimately, I'm like, let's throw it out. We Mystic Sanctuary, we're thinning our deck. We're gonna put the Ponder back on top because I like desperately need to draw cards. I can't have, this is a do nothing hand, although the Scalding Tarn does get more Mystic Sanctuary. So I'm gonna Ponder, and then I find like double Fractured Sanity, which is great. I'm going to hold up the Flusterstorm if they decide to go with their Cascade spell, the one that triggers and lets me copy, which is exactly what they're going to do, by the way. So I am able to then draw a Fractured Sanity and then go from there. I can hold the Scalding Tarn to put a Fractured Sanity back on top if I need to, or if it's a Maddening Cacophony, if I need to be more efficient on mana, maybe I want to double spell, whatever it is. So I'm able to just like keep going that way. It's fantastic. Now they're going to Creative Technique. I'm going to actually let this go. So just so you know, the first Creative Technique that resolves is my copy. So I Flusterstorm countering the next 2 copies. That's how this is going to work. My copy goes on the stack to resolve first, and then I'm going to get my free Fractured Sanity value just off of this, which is great. And that was actually great serendipity. I'm pretty sure the card just allows you to shuffle your deck, then look for a card, which is great. That was great that that was the random draw. There at 8 cards left. I don't even think they could win if they wanted to at this point. But at this point, we're all weapons down. We're going to Scalding Tarn. They're going to Show and Tell. We're going to Tarn into a Mystic Sanctuary to put the Fractured Sanity on top. I guess the card they had in hand just wasn't like a Maelstrom Wanderer, like anything relevant. I am at 15 life. Let's see if we can't seal this out in game 3. Then I got the general gist of this. I'm feeling pretty confident. I mean, look, like I said, we're getting pretty lucky. They have the Leylines, but we have the Void, so that's perfectly fine. I have a Hedron Crab, but double Fractured Sanity and a Daze is insane. Now, the Ashiok Dream Render is there in case they have an answer to Leyline of the Void. Based on what I see in list, they don't, but just in case they get spicy with like a Brazen Borrower, I don't want them to have that ability to keep their graveyard with those Emrakuls. So I have the Ashiok in there. Ultimately, if they do have some type of weird search, I can just Ashiok to mess with that stuff. So I'm just developing my mana. The Forceful is such a good draw along with the Daze. So I'm just going to start throwing out spells. I have Daze. I have Force of Will. The Force of Will can go to the Hedron Crab for all I care. It's honestly slim pickings from here from our opponent. They mulligan, by the way, both games down to like 4 or 5, so that's working for us as well. We have milled over 28 cards, half of their library pretty much at that point. We're actually going to Daze this because ultimately I'm still at 18 life, but I don't want their spells costing less. And also that this also makes them tap out more mana, take more counters off the Sandstone and the kind of the Scary over there just to use up and use spells. So if they cast a spell and I force it, they lose all their mana off of them. So that's a great way to win that. Now, Sakashima is going to enter. That's fine. Now, Creative Technique. Ultimately, I have to remember the first trigger is mine. So I'm going to Brazen Borrower, returning that so I can actually then use my Brainfreeze to hit my opponent. I'm realizing the storm count is going high, so I'm actually going to let a bunch of these spells resolve. In response to that, though, I'm going to Brainfreeze because they find a Leyline Sanctity. I can't get too greedy. Throw out the Brainfreeze. The storm is working for me in this case. Now, ultimately, this isn't like I'm milling them to 0. It's milling them really dang low, though. This is a lot of targets that they're not going to get off the Creative Technique. You know, future Cascade targets. The Sakashima is going to enter as the Carnosaur. They're going to keep discovering, but discovering into what? They're going to go to their turn. They can swing at me for a bunch of damage, but I'm still alive, right? The Trumpeting Carnosaur itself, if we take a look at it, doesn't really do much. It only deals 3 damage. I'm at 4. Then on my turn, I Cacophony. And honestly, the classic mill strategy works in Legacy. I'm just trying to figure out the list. Let me know in the comment section down below. What changes would you make? Because I'm actually really excited to play Mono Blue Mill in Legacy.